Half a day and good afternoon. The Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety and Homeland Security will now convene this public hearing. Today is November 1st, 2017, and it is currently 2:01 p.m. In accordance with the Open Government Law, notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and main media broadcasting outlets on October 23rd, 2017, and the second notice on October 27, 2017. Today, the committee will be conducting a public hearing on Bill number 155-34 as introduced by Senator William M. Castro, which is an act to add a new Article 3 to Chapter 8, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to prohibiting the use of drones and unmanned robots within the airspace or 1,000 feet of certain government facilities and providing penalties for the same. I'll now give Senator Castro some time to explain his bill and the intent of the bill and the purpose. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the advent of technology, we were attempting to be proactive to include in the statute a provision that would attempt to regulate drones. And the initial bill, as it's written here in 155-34, was a good starting point. We've had two roundtables with broad participation from the law enforcement community, as well as a representative from GRM, and then we had another one with the utilities, specifically GWA and GPA. I've also had the privilege to meet or to communicate with folks from this industry, the recreational drone industry, and got their feedback as well. In a nutshell, you know, regulation of drones is being attempted throughout the contiguous U.S. It runs the full gamut from attempting to protect individual rights from peeping drones, as one example was given in Seattle, to perhaps just providing a broad protection, but a very explicit and firm one that it's prohibited in any use of criminal activity. And so the purpose of today's public hearing, Madam Chair, I'm hoping to see if there's any additional feedback that may warrant an amendment to the bill as it's written. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank fellow Senator Luis Muñoz for joining us today. We'll call up the oral testimony, Deputy Director Kate Baltazar. And then just for the record, we have in favor Manny Cruz. So, welcome, Deputy Director.
Suzuz Masi, Madam Chair, and Senator Castro and Senator Muñoz. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill 155-34, known as the Security of Government Facilities Act. I have to give a special thank you to Senator Will Castro for engaging me from the beginning, as early as April or May of this year, having the foresight and seeing the potential for this to become an issue, not just for our department, but for other agencies and critical infrastructure as well. And as we are all well aware, technology is an ever-present and ever-evolving aspect of our modern life. Many use it for the advancement of good endeavors. However, we know that the other side of the coin exists. We certainly know that at the Department of Corrections. And that technology is increasingly used to commit crimes. And in my growing concern for the safety of all of Guam's families and thereby the community, invasion of privacy and certain spaces that should be confidential and protected, that is a growing concern of mine, certainly. And this effort to me is just the beginning. As the bill states, our facility has already experienced encounters with drones being flown over our facility, with one crashing next to a housing unit. While the true nature of the drone's intent may never really be determined, to us that is irrelevant. While not meant to hinder our community hobbyists, drones have no place flying over our correction facilities, Mingilao, Hagatnya, or any of the spaces that we operate. For whatever reason, there's potential for carrying contraband, surveillance, and unnecessary distractions that we would like to prevent. So DOC, in short, supports this measure in the restriction of drone operation within the specified areas without express consent by the administrator. And I'm available for any questions or inquiries. Seduce Masi.
Thank you very much, Deputy Director Baltazar. I will open up up to my colleagues. If they have any questions, you can go ahead and feel free to ask. And then also, if you have any questions of the sponsor of this bill or any concerns, please feel free to share. Okay, Senator Castro.
So just, you know, I don't know if it was serendipity or happenstance, whatever happened, I know we introduced the bill on July 24th, and shortly thereafter, there was a drone incident at the Department of Corrections. Could you elaborate a little bit on that and whether or not, you might have mentioned it in your testimony, can you just, like, once again, just briefly cover that for the record?
Certainly, Senator. In the very early evening hours, I can get the date for you, but I don't have it exactly, but it was shortly after this bill was introduced. There was spotted by our special operations officers a drone that was hovering over one of the housing units, and then it crashed moments later. So they were able to retrieve it, and I know that they were trying to get some information from it, the model, serial number, which perhaps would have led to whom this unmanned aircraft was registered. To my knowledge, we haven't been able to determine the owner. No one has come to claim it. And the only thing we can speculate was that it was a test flight or perhaps just an unfortunate accident into our facility. But just the fact that it was able to fly so very closely to a housing unit was very, very concerning for us. And the director and I we're sort of in shock. I mean, we know that drones exist and they're used by hobbyists. Our surrounding areas, not for the main area in the front, where the roadway is mostly jungle. We have 47 acres behind us. And while we do have residential areas flanking us, it was very disturbing that it was able to get that far in. And so luckily we were able to retrieve it. But it just demonstrated to us the ease by which our facility could be infiltrated. And so this bill was very, very timely, because I know in April or May, Senator Castro and I were meeting and talking about the possibility of this happening, because it has happened many times in the United States. I think documented short of 24, but it's unknown who was committing these acts of contraband introduction by drone, and how many have gone undetected, because the technology to detect drones is developing among correctional facilities. So for us, it's also interesting to note that we captured the flight of a drone on one of our cameras. It didn't crash into our facility, basically just flew by. And that was captured by Captain Anton Uggen. So that was probably a few days, about a week after that first incident. So this bill is really relevant and is timely. As you know, with our issues with contraband, contraband interdiction plan that we have should definitely include unmanned aircraft.
Oh, I'd like to thank the Vice Speaker for joining us, and Senator Lee. Thank you. Senator Muñoz?
Thank you, Kate, for being here. I know I was going to tease Senator Castro and say that was great staging, by the way, for the introduction, and then just so happened to have one fly over. So you don't know if there was any criminal intent with that particular drone that flew over, and I guess if it was an unfortunate accident, it's kind of an expensive, unfortunate accident.
It was a very expensive, unfortunate accident. We had someone from the FBI take a look at it. It's actually about a $1,200 to $1,500 drone. And it may have just been an unfortunate accident, but it still demonstrated the fact that we could be breached in that way. And now with drones having the capacity to fly miles and miles on battery power and have surveillance capabilities and be able to track inmate movement or officers' movement or officer assignment. It's just very alarming for us at the facility but we're on the lookout now. It definitely has made us more diligent. It's not something you think about when we keep abreast of corrections technology and news across the country. We were aware that this was happening and happening quite successfully. Even in supermax prisons and such, drones are being used. So this is a very timely measure.
So it could have been happening even prior to that without you acknowledging it, or could drones have been flying over DOC even prior to the introduction of this legislation?
Yes, Senator, because our cameras were installed earlier this year, and that includes our eye in the sky, our 360. But even with the 360 camera, it's limited to where it happens to be pointing at that time because it swivels. So it could very well have been happening. Drones have been around on Guam. Enthusiasts in my family have been building their drone arsenal for many years now. So yes, absolutely, it could have been happening.
So I guess I'm trying to understand then, so if we were to incorporate this as a law, would we have to install cameras in all the other facilities that are going to be looking out for the drones? I mean, is that something that you would recommend,
I think just in general for surveillance throughout our facility, we have received or will be in receipt of more monies to do that, as well as for our Hagåtña facility. So we'll be able to capture them, but absent of this policy, there isn't much we can do in terms of holding them accountable for it. We don't have the jurisdiction absent of this policy. So even if, for example, with the drone that crashed, assuming that we had found out who it was, we don't have the proper policy to keep them accountable, to hold them accountable. We couldn't do anything to prosecute them, in other words. Because in and of itself, as it stands, flying the drone over us, we don't have jurisdiction over our airspace. But if we had a measure like this that specifically ironed out the fact that any operation of a drone throughout the facility, over the facility, any law enforcement facility, would give it the teeth that we would need to be able to hold them accountable. Unless there was a clear intent. For example, had we found contraband strapped to the drone, or if there were cameras strapped to the drone and we could extract the video and see what their intent was. Apart from that, there would be no way to hold them accountable. Or, in fact, there was a crash of a drone just outside our facility, and it was one of the residents down the street who did come to us, and he said, "If this drone shows up on your camera, it was me." He said, "I was just flying it. It ran out of battery in it, and it crashed." But I would imagine those are few and far between, because the person, to our knowledge, the person who first crashed that drone has not come to claim it.
I guess my final question then would be,
yes, ma'am.
How do you classify it if it, say, for example, if it were an accident or criminal intent? Of course, there would have to be an investigative process, right? Because this says that it would be, if it violates, it would be a misdemeanor. So even in an accident, would it still be classified as a misdemeanor?
Yes. So, Senator, with this, we could file a complaint with the Guam Police Department, and they could take that complaint and then further investigate the source of the drone, the serial number, the person it was registered to, and question them and investigate what their intent was for flying so close to the correction facility, because then the law would clearly state that it's not permissible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Half a day, Kate.
Half a day, Madam Vice Speaker.
Deputy Director, and half a day to your daughter, my goddaughter.
Yes.
Good to see you. Anyways, I wanted to just, I understand the concerns for security, correctional facilities, and your Hagåtña facility also, but this list that's in this bill it includes things that are not related to corrections, and
Yes.
so I was wondering if you are also testifying. You said you support this entire bill, but are you saying that we need to include all of these for correction purposes?
So if it had to be amended, in short, Madam Vice Speaker, I would just be testifying on behalf of the Department of Corrections.
All right.
Yes.
If we said Department of Corrections, does that include then your Agana facility? It
Yes,
says
ma'am.
within the following, and it's buildings, facilities, offices. So this is enough to say for your purposes?
Yes,
Department
ma'am.
of Corrections. Okay.
It would include our Hagåtña Detention Facility, Federal Detention Facility, as well as Adult Correctional Facility in Manilao.
Okay. And what about the 1,000 feet? Because I heard you talking about your parameters. And so what about the 1,000 feet? Does that work in your case for correction facilities on Guam?
I think for us, the quantification of the distance, we're open to what distance it might be, 500 feet, 1,000 feet. I know that there are drones who can fly miles and miles into the sky. You know, I'm not sure. But to answer your question, we're open to what the distance might be, so long as we could quantify that it's over our facility within our airspace.
Okay. All right, good. Because, yeah, so the criteria, just for those who are watching, says no person shall operate over the grounds or within the airspace or 1,000 feet of any of these things. So it's that 1,000 feet that seemed to me, you know, in light of how close we are to residences and other things up there at the Department of Corrections, that, yeah, you would be enough to restrict your area from your facility. Is your facility pretty well defined? Like the
Yes, ma'am. The footprint of it, if you, I should have brought, but on Google Earth, it's pretty well defined in the areas that have housing units. So to us, you may fly well above 1,000 feet without any malice. And that might be just somebody going from one end of Dairy Road to My Road. But any closer now becomes suspect in our minds.
So 1,000 feet going up.
Yes, ma'am, 1,000
Okay,
feet.
all right. But because the way this is written, I was envisioning 1,000 feet outside of your borders, which to me would really impinge on many of the houses in the area and other people.
Yes, and that's a great point, Madam Vice Speaker, because during the meetings, the informational meetings that we had, that I was invited to with Senator Castro, that's one of the concerns that they had was there's homes 500 feet, 200 feet from Department of Corrections, as there are 500 feet from the Guam Memorial Hospital or other areas. So how we quantify the distance, I think, is secondary to the intent and the ability to determine the intent of the presence of that drone.
All right. I'd like to also ask if you could formally submit maybe a supplemental testimony that talks about what if we included the word an intention here, because it doesn't include one, and normally these criminal prohibitions should include some kind of intent. So no person shall knowingly or intentionally operate. And how would your department feel about that intention being added? So I'm on page 4 of the bill, line 5, where it says no person shall operate. I'm proposing to add the words no person shall knowingly or intentionally operate. So that way it takes care of it if it's an accident or they just lost control of their vehicle or whatever you call those. Yes, the drones. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If, of course, yeah. If you're able to do that, please send it to the chair, and I would be interested to know what the department's position is on that.
Absolutely. Well, subsequent to this, we had planned on submitting formal written testimony as well within the allotted days, so we will do that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Speaker.
Does anyone have any questions for Senator Castro? Any concerns? No? Okay. Senator Castro, would you like to have a few closing remarks?
Brief. Thank you, Madam Chair. The input provided today and the questions that were put forward by my colleagues are indeed very helpful. I'm not, for myself, I'm wide open in terms of having this discussion. But as I mentioned earlier, it was an excellent starting point when we had all the stakeholders at the table, at least a significant amount at the two roundtables. And so your input is well received, and I appreciate it. I want to thank the co-sponsors, of course. Senator Louise is here, and I do want to reiterate for the record that at least my intent was never set out to over-regulate the use of drones, whether it's commercial or recreational. Rather, it's to ensure that there's a provision in the statute that would speak to the use of such unmanned aerial aircrafts or vehicles in furtherance of a criminal activity or enterprise. And so how exactly we do that, I'm hoping we can continue to work together and just amend the bill accordingly to reflect the intent and not be overly restrictive. I think the question about the 1,000-foot radius was an excellent one as well. So thank you, Madam Chair, also for the privilege to have this publicly heard.
All right, thank you very much. If there are no further comments or questions, we will conclude this hearing at 2:22 p.m. If you or anyone at the agency would like to submit written testimony, please send it via email to Senator T.C. Nelson at guamlegislature.org. Testimony submitted within the next 48 hours will be included in the committee report for this public hearing, which will be uploaded as a public document within the next 30 days. Have a safe afternoon, and Sidas Masi. Thank you.
Sidas Masi.